So there are many SEO factors that determine whether your brand gets mentioned by ChatGPT, but one is majorly overpowered right now, which are listicles. And in this video, I'll show you how to use listicles to get more brand mentions in ChatGPT. Let's dive right in. So the number one objective of doing generative engine optimization, GEO for short, or AI SEO, whatever you want to call it, the number one thing we want to do is we want our brands to appear in the AI generated response for commercial queries. So the queries that actually help us drive revenue. And so this is an example for best bookmark managers for 2025. And you can see here that if we're selling, let's say a bookmark manager type of software, we need to appear in this list. Because if we don't appear in this list, we're not going to have any chance of driving revenue. Okay, so how do we actually get the AI to recommend us? And come to find out, it's actually not as magical as you might think. Okay, so there's a lot of different mechanisms, and going forward on my channel, I'll be showing all the different variables. But because each of these variables is pretty in depth, I'm just going to focus on one today, and that is using listicles to influence these answers. Okay, so I'll show you real quickly an example of this. So we'll scroll down and we can look at the citations. Okay, so we'll click on this. And because this is very low competition, there actually aren't as many listicles popping up, but you can see this is an example over here from Zapier. Okay, so for best read it later apps, this is an example of a listicle that we would want to be mentioned on. Okay, so if we go ahead and just click through on this, you'll see, if our brand's not being mentioned here, we're in trouble. Okay, so we need to be mentioned here. So this would become a prospect for us that we could then go and do outreach for. Okay, so that is the basis of what we're trying to do is identify these listicles and then go after them, because there is a lot of evidence that ChatGPT leans on listicles a lot. Now, there's two things that you can do. Number one, you can actually create your own listicle. Okay, so you can host your own listicle on your website. Or number two, you want to go out and look at existing listicles and try to get placed on those. Okay. And then there's actually a third option, which is if you can't get placed on an existing listicle, then you need to try to pitch that website to maybe write an updated, listicle or do a guest post or something. Okay. So there's options. All right. But I want to show you a couple things. So first thing you want to do is get your own house in order. So what I would recommend doing is the way that I typically do this, and this will probably be the same for most industries, but at least for SaaS in particular, my favorite strategy is to do a singular version of the core keyword. Okay, so for example, best bookmark manager. So like I'll show you on Rankability, for example, we're starting to do a little bit of SEO on this website now. You'll see if we go to the AI writer, for example, and we'll take a look at this, you'll see best AI content writer for SEO and GEO. Okay, so I didn't say best content writers, I didn't put that plural in there because I don't want to trigger a listicle based on the intent, because obviously I'm not going to mention any other tools on this page because it's a commercial page. Okay, so what I recommend doing is having both. I want you to have kind of like a singular version of this and then a listicle where you can kind of control that narrative a little bit better. Okay, so an example of this is for this Collect Read website, which is just a little test website that we have. You'll see that the current homepage is, first of all, not long enough. So only about 600 words. The ideal is probably about being in 1,000 words based on the median word count for the competitors. And then most importantly, we're looking at a 3 rankability score. So this essentially tells us this page is not relevant. Okay, it will never rank for best bookmark manager being this irrelevant. So what do? Well, a couple things we can do. Number one is you can use, Rankability's AI writer to actually produce a relevant piece of content for you, or you can just do this manually, whatever you want to do. So in the context, I'll show you a real quick example of what this looks like when we've gone through manually and updated this. So what I did is just copy the topics and I went to Claude to revise this particular page. And as you can tell, here's the outcome of this. And we'll see how much better it is now and how much more relevant it is. Okay, we can see just very quickly with some slight upgrades, we can hit on these topics a lot better. And obviously it's not formatted in any way, but you can see we didn't go super aggressive with the word count. We're kind of right in range here, right around that 1,000 target. I always like to be on the lower end of the target just to be on, kind of not go overboard, especially with commercial pages, because commercial pages should not be like super text heavy, but you still need to cover the topics. Okay. And one thing about commercial pages is really important is when you're looking at these topics here, a lot of these are kind of unique selling propositions, right? And so if you're not covering these same things, you don't have these same features, there's some gaps in your software. And so you can actually view this as a way to, improve your software, fill in those gaps. And then of course you can talk about it on your page. So first things first is optimize your existing product page. Okay. That's really, really important. Then thing you want to do number two is you want to create a listicle. Okay. And this will be hosted on your blog itself. Now, what I like to do is I like to use deep research. Okay. And before, when you used to do listicles, you would have to go and do this all yourself, right? So you'd have to go and look at all the different websites, find all the different software options out there. And you don't have to do that anymore because deep research, either in Gemini or ChatGPT or Perplexity, even Grok, for example, there's a lot of options now for deep research. And it's basically, it costs pennies. So there's just no good reason to be doing this yourself. And so what I do is I use this very simple prompt, and I like to hopefully collect some user experience, some user generated content, because I find that it makes it much more content rich, okay, and much deeper. So it does that research, and then it ends up with this extensive research, which is always way overboard. It's like super intense, super long, like it's like a dissertation. Okay. And you don't want to take this and trust me, I've tested it. You don't want to just take this and like slap it on your site. It's not a good idea. It's not user friendly. It's not designed for, internet-based content. So what you want to do is you want to take this deep research and you want to feed it back into another AI. So the one I've been using recently, I'm always switching different ones. I have no allegiances to any of these tools. I just use whichever one I'm kind of enjoying at the moment. And in this current moment, I've been using Claude. Okay. And so here's an example of what I like to do is I'll say, create a listicle for the best bookmark managers based on this extensive research. Okay. And then I paste all of the deep research. And what it will do is it will produce a very, very solid piece of content, right? And it's going to look like this. Okay, this is a pretty solid piece of content. You can see we can go ahead and like copy this over. Just do a click copy. And then we'll go over to rankability and you'll see I can just go ahead and paste this in. And it does a pretty good job. Like not bad at all. All right, so it's like a 26, okay, with some actual formatting in there. All right, so 26, pretty relevant, but not good enough. Okay, it needs to be more relevant if we're going to be able to succeed on this keyword. So then what I do is I copy all of the keywords from rankability. Then I go back to Claude again and I say, now I want you to revise this and cover more critical topics. Okay, so then it will go through and it will revise it. All right, and so then just go right down here. We're going to open up the new one. And we're going to copy this over, and then we're going to go ahead and paste the new one in here and see how much better it is. Okay. And as you can tell, very, very quickly, it automatically improves this like in seconds. Okay. So now we went from a very good piece of content to a still a very good piece of content, but much more relevant. And relevance is what wins, not just in search engines, but also AI platforms. Okay. Relevance is not going away. A lot of this stuff will change. Everything will change. It's constantly in flux. But there's one thing that is universally going to always be true, which is every platform wants relevance. Relevance is the number one thing that matters. Okay. So this is just a very small example of how quickly you can go through this. And by the way, inside of rankability, we're actually adding a new feature where you're going to be able to do this automatically inside of rankability. So when you do the AI option, you're going to be able to do deep research for your topic. We'll go and collect all of that and then bring it back here, and it's going to be able to, produce this automatically optimized piece of content. So very excited about that because this process is a little time consuming, and lots of switching through windows, but in general, you can piece it together right now and do a very, very good job. Okay. But the key is the relevance. You have to get the relevance right. All right. So that's the first thing you want to do, is because this is an area that you can control. You can go to your website, you can update your product page, and you can create a listicle on your own website. So you might as well just start there. And if we go and look actually at ChatGPT as an example, you'll see that there are citations here popping up from actual software companies that would appear on these lists. So like you have Raindrop and Instapaper and Readwise. Like these are first party recommendations. These are first party citations, meaning that they're actually like they have interest in this, okay? And it is still being pulled as a citation. So ChatGPT does not discriminate. It does not say, oh, this is a first party citation, therefore we're not going to use it. It's just going to crawl everything, right? At least right now, it doesn't seem to discriminate in that way. So there is still utility in trying to control some of this with your website. Like your website is still very, very useful, okay? So next thing I want to do is now I want to find opportunities. Okay. So you could theoretically just pull opportunities from the citations here and just find like all of the listicles here that you can find. That's totally a valid approach. Okay. That's totally a valid approach. However, ChatGPT just launched Agent, and you can use Agent to actually streamline this a lot faster. Well, actually, let me revise. It's not much faster. It's fast because you don't have to do it, but it's slow to process. Okay. So I've been using it now since it came out, and it works for a very long time. So like an example of this is, you can see I said, find up to 100 listicles to get our brand featured on. We sell bookmark management software, and we like to get on lists like best bookmark managers. Only include lists where our brand is not mentioned. And then I mentioned the brand. Okay. And you can see for 21 minutes it worked. And you can see the whole process that it goes through. We can actually go to the activity and you can see everything that it's doing. And as you can imagine, if you did this yourself, it could take you 21 minutes. It could take you probably double this amount of time. Honestly, with distractions and various things, we're probably looking at least double. So the cool part is when you run these, you can walk away and just let it do its thing. And it's really, really accurate. So because I used Operator when it first came out, it had a lot of flaws, like tons of flaws. But this is this like new version of the Agent is a lot better. It's a lot better. And in fact, I fact checked all of these. We can see as an example. So we'll just go ahead and open one of these up, and you can see these are legitimate, completely legitimate posts. Okay. Like these are actual listicles. These are listicles where we want to be mentioned. Okay. This is very, very important. All right. And if the agent was able to identify these, that means that it was accessible, easily accessible from search or wherever it found this source, which means if it's easily accessible, it's going to influence the generated response. Okay. It's going to influence this generated response. So we want to be there. We want to be on any source that is likely to influence this response. Okay. So that's the first part is you can just use the agent to do this. You don't have to. You could of course just do this manually with lots of search queries, but for 1 minute of work to get some really solid sources, pretty hard to beat at this point. Okay. So then what you want to do is you want to take these sources, and I would recommend exporting them. And what I like to do is like to run them through a batch analysis on Ahrefs. You could use SEMrush. It doesn't make a difference. Okay. So I'll show you an example of this. This is a batch analysis from Ahrefs. So basically I took all the URLs and I ran them through the batch analysis. Now I want you to pay attention to one thing that's really, really important for influencing the answers in ChatGPT, which is this right here, this Ahrefs rank. Now, ChatGPT doesn't use Ahrefs rank. Like it's not using it in its mechanism, but it's more the underlying idea that Ahrefs rank represents, which is that websites with a lot of link equity, websites with a lot of authority tend to influence the AI generated responses a lot more. And in fact, there's some evidence that ChatGPT has a whitelist when it goes through and does its training data. It has a whitelist of approximately 1 million of the top domains. Okay. Which means when it's going in training, like for, 03 or 40 or for any of these, the new models that are coming out, and it goes offline to do its training, it's not like using PageRank or anything like that. It's just using this whitelist and assigning a little bit, an extra point for, a citation that appears from a whitelisted domain. Okay. So the point of me telling you this is that if you want to get cited, if you want your brand to get mentioned more in these answers, you need to try to get as many mentions on these top 1 million domains. Potentially could be more, but at least these top 1 million, domains. Okay. The whitelisted domains. Now, Ahrefs rank is one that somewhat measures this concept. There's also Majestic Million. There's a bunch of other ones out there. You can just Google it. But in general, you can use this as a vetting mechanism for the prospects. Okay, so you can see here, I basically put a yellow on those that are outside of the top million. Okay, and in fact, actually, sorry, I this is actually 30. Let's see here. Yeah, no, this is correct. 300,000. So these are all outside of the top million Ahrefs rank. This could be different for Majestic, but in general, this just tells us that these opportunities are our best opportunities. Okay, these are our best opportunities because they actually are in, at least Ahrefs top million. We can assume it's probably pretty similar for any other source. Okay, so these are the sources that we want to spend a lot of time on to try to see if we can, get our brand mentioned there, because we know it's going to probably be highly influential for influencing the generated responses. Okay, so that's the idea. This doesn't mean that these particular prospects are bad per se. You should still pursue them, but you also need to prioritize. And it's going to be way more effective if you were to get a link on SourceForge, or get a mention on SourceForge, or any of these other websites. Okay, they're going to be way more impactful, like way more. Just one mention is more impactful than like 5, even 10 of these mentions. Okay, so very, very important concept to understand. And then the other thing you can do, just to kind of briefly show you this, Ahrefs has a new feature when you look at the overview where you can see AI citations, and you have to pay extra. This is like an upgrade to actually see the citations, but you can actually use this without even having to pay. You can just look at the citations as a way for vetting these opportunities. And this doesn't mean this is a bad opportunity, because it's not cited a lot in the AI platforms, but it is an indication that it isn't likely to influence the generated responses very well. Okay. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, when we look at this, this website, they have tons of citations across many LLMs. All right. So that tells us that it's very, very likely to influence the generated responses based on just the pure volume of citations that it has across these platforms. Okay. So once again, this isn't a matter of elimination, it's a matter of prioritization. Okay. And so for like this one, I'd want to put a lot of my resources and time into this to try to figure out, all right, how do we get our brand mentioned here? And that's time well spent, because if you land one in here, you're really going to influence these platforms. And by the way, little trick that a lot of people don't know, ChatGPT and the LLMs don't discriminate against organic mentions and sponsored mentions. Okay. Maybe that will change, but as of right now, it doesn't seem to know the difference. It doesn't seem to care, maybe even at all. Maybe it just doesn't matter. But you could pay for a sponsored post and have the same effect as getting it organically. Okay. So, money wins in this case. All right. So just wanted to show you that, because this is just such a powerful, powerful thing to do. And then these listicles greatly influence ChatGPT and the LLMs. And more importantly, one thing you can do too with the agent, which I'm still playing with like the process because it's really slow, but I can show you an example of this. So like I had it kind of supply a list of URLs, but the next thing I had to do is I had it find contact information. Okay. So, find a way to contact the editor or something. And it took a long time, like an hour to do this. Now, if you've ever done this manually and you've been doing link building anyway, it is really time consuming to find contact information. Like you can use hunter.io to help you, but like even then it's still kind of just a really manual, kind of brutal process. So I'm not actually surprised that it took an hour. But you can see it did a very, very good job. So if it couldn't find a, some sort of email or something, it basically just resorted to a contact page. But for the most part, we're looking at about, an 80% success rate. And of course, I know someone will probably ask, are some of these hallucinated? Okay. Are these some hallucinated answers? And I already tested a few and doesn't seem so, right? I haven't tested all of them, but based on just some very early tests here, they are not hallucinated. They are actually legitimate. In fact, I ran it through an email validator here, and this is legit. This is an actual legit address. And I need to run obviously more of these through here, but just a very, very small example where we can see that like this is actually doing a lot of time consuming work. And this can really accelerate your ability to market your brand, ability to ultimately do, traditional just marketing. I wouldn't even be thinking about link building per se. I'd be thinking more about how do we get our brand mentioned here? I think that's one of the things that's really changed is like before it used to be like, how do we just build the authority of our site? That was the like tunnel vision on let's just grow our authority as much as possible, get as many links. Like that was the focus. I don't think that's as important right now. I think what matters more is deliberately going after certain opportunities that are known to influence these generated responses. And we know that the listicles greatly influence the responses. So this is time well spent. So take advantage of, not just understanding how AI works, but also use AI to your advantage. Okay. This is a unprecedented time, as you can imagine. Okay. So I hope that helps. And by the way, I have a free geo checklist. So you can just I'll have a link below the video. You can download this checklist. It's a version 1 of this checklist. I'm going to be coming out with many, many versions as I learn new things. But as of right now, this can get you off to a really, really good start and start to kind of begin this process of trying to influence these LLMs because they are moldable. This isn't a static situation. I can tell you that. And we already have a lot of evidence that we can kind of morph and form the responses. And now, it used to be SEO is just those blue links, but now SEO is really about trying to, we'll say nicely, optimize those generated responses. So I hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.